It was just like any other day at the mall. I was there to pick up a few things. Nothing too exciting. The usual buzz of people rushing past, the hum of music from the stores, and the chatter that filled the air. But something felt different that day. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way people seemed to be in a rush, or maybe it was the way the mall felt strangely empty despite being filled with shoppers. I turned the corner near the food court, ready to grab a coffee when I saw him. Johnny Depp. Yes, the Johnny Depp. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat. He was there, casually browsing a store. But it wasn't like he was swarmed by fans or being escorted by bodyguards. He was alone and he looked, well, normal. Just like any other person, walking around with no special treatment, no flashy attention. It felt surreal, like a dream. I didn't want to stare, but it was impossible not to. He had this aura around him, a mix of mystery and calmness. The way he moved was so fluid, so effortless. But then, I saw something that caught my eye, a little girl. She was standing just a few steps away from him. I didn't notice her before, but now she was there, staring at Johnny with wide eyes. At first I thought maybe she was a fan too, but no. The look on her face wasn't of admiration, it was something else. Curiosity, maybe? I couldn't quite tell. She was small, maybe 6 or 7, and she had messy brown hair tied into a ponytail. Her clothes were simple, but she wore a bright smile that somehow made everything around her seem more alive. As I continued to watch, she took a hesitant step forward, and I could see her whispering something to Johnny. I didn't catch the words, but whatever she said made him stop in his tracks. He looked down at her, a soft expression crossing his face. And then he knelt down to her level, leaning in like he wanted to hear her better. At that moment, something tugged at my heart. There was something about the way she looked at him, almost like she knew him, in a way that no one else did. Little did I know, this would be a moment I would never forget. I couldn't help but watch. It felt like I was intruding on something private, yet I couldn't look away. The little girl was still speaking to Johnny, her words so quiet that I couldn't make them out from where I stood. But whatever she said, it made him smile. That smile, genuine, warm, and full of kindness, told me that whatever was going on, it was something special. As he straightened up, he waved over at a nearby bench, silently inviting the little girl to sit with him. She hesitated for a second, as if unsure whether she should, but then, without a word, she carefully walked over and sat beside him. It was strange to see someone like Johnny Depp, someone so famous, so larger than life, sitting there on that ordinary bench, chatting with a little girl like they were two old friends. It was almost as if time had slowed down for them, the noise of the mall fading into the background. I wanted to leave. It felt like I was spying, but I couldn't. I needed to know more. Something about their interaction made my chest tighten with a feeling I couldn't explain. It was like there was a story behind it, one that needed to be told. The way Johnny looked at the girl, the way she seemed to trust him completely, it wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. As I stood there, trying not to seem too obvious, I overheard snippets of their conversation. The little girl was asking him questions. At first, they were the usual ones, questions about his movies, about the life of a celebrity. But then, her voice softened, and her tone changed. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Johnny's expression shift. His smile faded just a little, replaced by a look of deep concern. It was as if the little girl was revealing something to him, a truth, a hurt, something he hadn't expected. And Johnny didn't react with the usual celebrity bravado. Instead, he listened. His face was full of understanding, and there was a sadness in his eyes. I could feel the tension between them, the weight of whatever was being shared. I felt my own heart ache in that moment, and I found myself wondering who this little girl was. What could she possibly be telling him that had such an effect on him? I couldn't stand it any longer. I took a step closer, trying to move as quietly as possible to hear more of what was happening. But then, as if sensing my presence, the little girl looked up. Her eyes met mine for the briefest moment, and I quickly looked away, feeling guilty for listening in. I had no right to intrude on such a private moment. But Johnny didn't seem to mind. He didn't even look in my direction. He was entirely focused on her, his full attention on the little girl beside him. And then I saw it. She took a deep breath and whispered something into his ear. It was so quiet, but it made Johnny's expression freeze. His eyes softened, his lips parted slightly in shock. I couldn't hear the exact words, but whatever it was, it left a mark on him. I could tell. And then, after a long silence, Johnny gently placed his hand on the girl's shoulder, as if offering comfort. "Is that really how you feel?" he asked, his voice soft and full of sincerity. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a random encounter. This wasn't just a celebrity interacting with a fan. There was something deeper happening here. The little girl nodded, her eyes a little clouded with sadness, and for a moment it hit me. The weight of what she had shared, the pain that seemed to linger in her eyes. It was as though she had just entrusted him with something very important, something that she couldn't tell anyone else. Johnny sat back, lost in thought for a moment, before he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You're strong," he said quietly. "Don't let anything make you feel small." I felt a lump in my throat. Something about the way he spoke to her, the tenderness in his voice, the way he listened without judgment, brought a tear to my eye. This wasn't just an actor talking to a fan. It was someone reaching out, offering genuine kindness in a world that often felt cold. I thought about walking away, giving them space, but then I saw the girl look down at the ground, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. I could see her holding back tears, trying to be strong. Johnny's eyes flickered to her, and without a word he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. He held it out to her, and I saw her glance at it curiously. It was a little silver pendant, shaped like a star. "This is for you," Johnny said, his voice still gentle. "A reminder that you're never alone, no matter what happens." The girl's eyes widened, and I saw her hesitate for a moment before she took the pendant. She didn't speak, but I could see the emotion in her face. She was overwhelmed. And that moment right there was the moment that broke me. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a promise. Johnny Depp had just done something for this little girl that went beyond kindness. It was a connection, something meaningful. I had to know more. Who was she? Why was she so sad? What had she been through to make Johnny's heart ache for her like this? I watched, helplessly trying to hide my emotions, as the little girl clutched the pendant in her small hands. Her fingers wrapped around it tightly, like she was afraid it might disappear if she let go. Johnny, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, as if giving away a part of himself was just second nature. The smile on his face remained gentle, but I could see the sadness lingering in his eyes. He was no longer the celebrity I had seen earlier, but someone else entirely. A man who understood loss and pain, who had been there and somehow survived. After a long pause, the little girl spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom? She's gone," she said. The words hit like a punch to the stomach, and I saw Johnny's face tighten in sorrow. She was sick, and now she's in heaven. My heart dropped to the pit of my stomach. I hadn't expected this, a child so young, so innocent, carrying the weight of such a heartbreaking truth. The mall, the crowd, everything around me seemed to disappear as I focused on that moment, on the girl who was sharing her grief with Johnny Depp, like he was the only person who could understand. Johnny didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just nodded slowly, his gaze softening as he processed her words. Then he reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "No one should have to go through that. But you know what? Your mom's love will never leave you. It'll always be with you like that star on the pendant." The little girl looked at the pendant again, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I miss her. I don't know how to be without her," she whispered, her voice breaking. Johnny's expression hardened with emotion, and I could see him struggle to find the right words. "I know it hurts," he said, his voice thick with compassion. "I know it feels like you're lost, but you're not alone. You've got people who care about you, and sometimes those people are the ones you least expect." I couldn't believe it. Here was a man who had lived through his own heartache. A man who had known loss, and yet he was there, comforting this little girl, offering her hope when it felt like all was lost. I realized that it wasn't just the star-shaped pendant that made this moment so special. It was Johnny's heart, his ability to connect with people, to make them feel like they mattered, even in their darkest hours. And then without warning, the little girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Are you a superhero?" she asked, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. Johnny chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in the air. "No," he said with a smile, "but maybe we all have a little bit of superhero in us when we're kind to others." Her face lit up at that, the faintest smile breaking through her sadness. For a moment she seemed like a different girl, lighter, freer, as though Johnny had given her a tiny piece of her happiness back. As I watched them, something in me began to shift. I had come into this mall just to grab a cup of coffee, but I had stumbled upon something far more profound. Johnny Depp, a man I'd only known through movies, was offering this little girl something real, something that no amount of fame or fortune could ever replace: compassion, empathy, and a sense of belonging. He was a superhero, in his own quiet, unassuming way. And the way he cared for this girl, this little stranger, was a reminder that there's still goodness in the world. But there was still something I needed to know. What had brought this girl to Johnny in the first place? What connection did they share that went beyond this moment in the mall? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their story than I had yet uncovered. As Johnny and the little girl sat there on the bench, I felt a deep pull to know more. I had to understand the connection between them. I had witnessed a moment of kindness, of shared pain, but it didn't feel like it was just by chance. There had to be something more. I hesitated for a long while, my feet frozen to the spot, wondering if I should approach them. But I knew it wasn't my place to intrude further. It wasn't just about curiosity, it was about respecting what they were going through. But the questions swirled in my mind, relentless and growing. Finally, as if he had sensed my presence once again, Johnny stood up, gently lifting the little girl to her feet. She held the pendant close to her chest, and I saw a flicker of something between them, a silent understanding. Before they left, Johnny turned, glancing around, and for a split second our eyes locked. I quickly looked away, embarrassed for being so obvious in my interest, but he didn't seem upset. Instead, he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, one that said, "It's okay. You're not alone in wondering." My heart raced as I watched them walk toward the exit, but then something unexpected happened. The little girl turned back to look over her shoulder at me. She didn't say anything, but there was a quiet intensity in her gaze. It was as if she knew something that I didn't, something important. It was then that I heard her voice, small and clear, like she was speaking to me directly. "I know you're wondering why he's here," she said, her words carrying a weight I hadn't expected. My breath caught in my throat. How did she know? Johnny, a few steps ahead, paused and looked back, his eyes meeting mine once again. The little girl pulled at his hand gently, urging him to keep moving, but before they disappeared from view, she whispered just one more thing. "He's the reason I'm still okay," she said, her voice almost a secret. And then, they were gone. I stood there, frozen, processing what she had just revealed. It was so simple, yet it hit me like a wave. Johnny Depp wasn't just comforting this little girl in her grief. He had been there for her in ways that went beyond that brief interaction. He had helped her survive something unimaginable. And now, here he was, offering her not just a moment of kindness, but a lifeline, a reason to hold on. The story behind this chance meeting wasn't just about celebrity and fans, it was about real connections, about how a single person can make all the difference in someone else's life, even when it seems like they're the least likely person to do so. As I walked away from the bench, I felt changed. I had come into the mall that day for a simple errand, but I left with a profound reminder of what it means to truly care for others, to be there when someone needs you the most, even when they don't ask for it. And though I may never know the full story behind that moment, I understood one thing. Sometimes, kindness comes in the most unexpected ways, and it can heal wounds that words alone cannot reach. Days passed after that encounter at the mall, but I couldn't shake the image of the little girl, the pendant, or Johnny Depp. It was a simple moment, yet it had impacted me deeply, in a way that words couldn't describe. I found myself thinking about that little girl, wondering where she was, how she was coping, and what would become of her. Johnny's words to her echoed in my mind. "You're strong." And he was right. She was strong, but it wasn't just her strength I thought about. It was the way that strength was nurtured, the way it was recognized and supported by someone who didn't owe her anything. It was Johnny's quiet, steady presence that made me realize how often we overlook the power of small, thoughtful actions. I had no way of knowing what happened next, but I hoped she was holding on, finding comfort, not just in the pendant, but in the love and kindness that surrounded her. Maybe it wasn't just Johnny who had helped her. Maybe there were others too, people who cared in their own ways, whether she saw them or not. Maybe, just maybe, that moment at the mall was part of a bigger story, one that wasn't finished yet. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post, a picture of Johnny Depp, this time with a group of people. It was taken at a charity event for children, something he had been involved in for years. But this wasn't just any event. Among the smiling faces was that same little girl. She stood beside him, holding the same silver pendant in her hand, her eyes brighter, more hopeful than I had seen them that day in the mall. And then I read the caption. This little one's strength is a reminder to us all. Sometimes, the smallest actions can make the biggest difference. Thank you for sharing your light, sweet girl. My heart swelled with emotion. Johnny had stayed involved. He had not just been a stranger who comforted a grieving child for a moment in time. He had continued to be there for her, part of her healing journey. It was the kind of thing people don't often see. The quiet, behind-the-scenes moments that reveal the true character of a person. It also made me think about my own life. How many times had I missed the opportunity to be there for someone simply because I didn't think it would matter? How many times had I hesitated, thinking that one small gesture wouldn't have any impact? But Johnny had shown me the power of showing up, of being present, of giving a piece of yourself to help someone else in their darkest moments. That, I realized, was what truly made someone special. A few months later, I was at the same mall again. This time, I wasn't just wandering around, mindlessly checking off a to-do list. No, this time I was looking for something that would remind me of the lessons I'd learned since that day. I found myself standing in front of a jewelry store, staring at a small silver pendant on display. It wasn't exactly the same as the one Johnny had given the little girl, but it was close enough. A simple star with an engraving that read, "Never alone." I smiled softly to myself as I picked it up and felt the cool metal in my hands. It felt like a sign. I didn't need to know exactly what had happened after that moment at the mall, but somehow I could sense that the little girl was okay. And maybe, just maybe, Johnny Depp had made a difference in a way that would last forever. I left the store, the pendant securely tucked in my bag, a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life with just a little bit of kindness, a little bit of care. And that maybe, sometimes, a chance encounter with a celebrity wasn't just about meeting them. It was about seeing the humanity in them and realizing that they could be the hero we never expected. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey. I hope this story touched your heart just as it did mine, reminding us all of the power of kindness and the difference one person can make in someone's life. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on future heartwarming tales. Like this video if it brought a smile to your face, and comment below with your thoughts. What part of the story resonated with you the most? And if you know someone who could use a little bit of kindness today, share this video with them. Your support means the world and helps us create more meaningful stories. Thank you again, and see you in the next one.